Welcome to the show, Max. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you here. So what's the scoop? How'd you become a lawyer? Why do you enjoy family law? And what's your approach?
Ooh, how long do we have? Well,
all the time.
I'll say, tongue in cheek, as a Jewish kid from the Midwest, I wasn't smart enough to be a doctor, so I became a lawyer. But I had a topsy-turvy road to being the family lawyer I am today. When I went to law school in Miami, Florida at the U, and I moved back to Michigan and I did securities litigation and arbitration, which is about as boring as it sounds. And in that I represented insurance companies and financial services dealers. And it was a great experience because I got that Fortune 500 contract negotiation, nationwide litigation experience. And I worked with the biggest banks, the biggest clients, really high level work, but there was just no fun or intrigue in it. And I always knew my personality was either criminal or family. So after bouncing around for about 6 years, I joined up with a family firm, and basically they said, my personality coupled with my skills and kind of having my business world experience with kind of my big personality who loves people, loves connecting, loves learning about people would really be a good fit. And I found that, is family law Disneyland? No, it's really hard. It's really emotionally charged and draining. But for me, if I practice law, family is where I'm at. And for me, it's quite simple. The biggest components of being a good family lawyer, I think, are communication and reasonableness. And most people are going to say divorce lawyers are reasonable. No, and that's why I differentiate myself, because I think to be a good family lawyer, you have to be incredibly responsive and communicative with your clients, with the court, with opposing counsel, with whomever. And I try to bring a thoughtful, reasonable approach. Most people see Marriage Story, or they see War of the Roses, or these movies and TV shows where it is scorched earth. We hate each other. We're emptying our retirement accounts to hire lawyers. And that's not how I practice. And that's not to say certain cases don't require that. But for me, I try to come at it as, how can we move you to your next chapter, your healthier chapter, your happier chapter, in an efficient and effective way? And I use efficient and effective. Those are kind of my buzzwords. And, I tell potential clients, I have a big personality. I can jump on the table and yell and scream. I can write a nasty letter. But most of the time, that's only helping me, the other lawyer and mediator. Inflaming tensions doesn't help people. And the same thing with prenups. I think prenups, it's important to have a methodical lawyer, to have a knowledgeable lawyer, but to also have a lawyer who can communicate and can know when to fight, know when to not, know when to press, know when to not, and really get you to an acceptable agreement with ample time before your wedding. So your anxiety, your anger, your fear, and your emotions don't overwhelm and overtake arguably the biggest day in your life. So I try to bring a different approach to my practice and my clients. And I always say, many of them like it and appreciate it and it resonates with them, but there are people who want the pit bull. And I always say, if you want the pit bull and I'm not it, I'm happy to give you one. I just think for many people, it's important to realize there are other options out there. And I think a big thing for me, and I think kind of the work you're doing, is about educating the general public to know that it's not just scorched earth litigation, or it's not just a $10,000 retainer for a prenup. There are more accessible ways to accomplish these objectives and to able to do so without raining hellfire down.
Right. So you said a few words that I think are really interesting. You said you're a collaborative lawyer and that your approach is making sure that it's not this scorched earth. How is that possible when somebody might feel very threatened by the fact that their partner does want something like a prenup? How can they approach this as something that is collaborative?
So, well, let me take a step back. The collaborative legal and collaborative divorce movement is about 20 years old, and it's for practitioners and clients who believe more can be achieved and creative solutions can be found at the conference room table versus just in front of court. But with respect to prenups, I think, and as hard as it is, I try to take some of the emotional and personal sting out. And I think if we're talking about the person who's receiving the drafted prenup, and so in theory, the person who does not have the estate or the person who might not have the money in the relationship, I think the first thing I tell that client, and we talk about here is, and I know it sounds oxymoronic, but don't take it personally, because let's say we have a couple, Jack and Jane, and Jack went to his lawyer and got a nasty prenup written. If I'm Jane's lawyer, the first thing I'm saying is, Jack's a contractor. Jack doesn't know family law and trust and estate law. Don't believe that Jack went to his lawyer and was like, let's write the most oppressive, most mean-spirited, most, vile prenup ever. That's not what happened. Jack hired a lawyer. The lawyer put together his boilerplate prenup on behalf of his client. And they're going to give it to us, and we're going to review it carefully. And we're going to say, what can you stomach? What can't you? What upsets you? What doesn't? What can you agree on? What do we need to negotiate? And so I think if you're able to step back and realize it isn't personal, it's not a vendetta, and it's more about someone just being a planner or being future-minded, or someone who frankly just knows the statistics about divorce, even though they're a bit inflated and it's kind of cliche. If you look at it from those standpoints and not just they're trying to fuck me over, I think it's easier to swallow. And it's not to say that I want a prenup to be swallowed, but unless two people are prepared to not go through with their marriage, and one person wants a prenup, you are going to swallow something. But at the same time, my job is to make your spouse have to swallow something too. In law and mediation, there's a phrase, the best deals are mutually dissatisfied and people are mutually unhappy. And that's kind of like it here. If they send us a prenup with 11 things they want, we're not going to give them 11. We're probably not going to give them 8. They're going to probably get 4 or 5 things they want, and you're going to get 4 or 5 things you want. And you're both going to be kind of pissed about 1 or 2 things. But our hope is when we conclude that process, our biggest hope is you put that in a drawer and never look at it again.
Right.
And that's how I start my prenup representations. I really try to say, 1, don't look at it personally. And 2, we are trying to work towards a possibility that we're all working to make sure it doesn't happen.
Right.
And I mean, let's be real. Well over 50% of marriages, if they had a prenup, they're staying married and they're never being used. So most people are just putting this document in a drawer and maybe not forgetting about it, but not regularly thinking about it or utilizing it. And so I think if we try to turn down the personal temperature, that's the first stage in making it a more palatable process to me.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. And I think if somebody, speaking personally, I've said this multiple times on the show, but I've gotten a prenup. I've gone through the lawyer thing. It was very tumultuous for me. I was Jane. I was on the receiving end where I was going line by line and reading every word and highlighting where I was going to get pissed off later tonight at dinner. And to your point, I did not realize it was a negotiation. And I think a lot of people that are quote unquote served a prenup in their marriage see it as something like that, where it's immediately offense and defense. So what I'm hearing,
kind of people see it, take it or leave it. And,
right.
And it's all about the presentation. I've had the person who wants the prenup be very delicate and very reassuring and saying, this is not take it or leave it, fuck you. This is, hey, this is a starting point. This is a conversation and a dialogue. And I think if I'm recommending to someone and I'm the drafter, present it that way or have the lawyer do that. And again, many lawyers are gruff. I really try to have bedside manner in a profession where that doesn't exist because, the person receiving it, even the most reasonable person is going to be slightly offended, is going to be slightly perturbed, is going to think there is some sort of character assassination. Am I a gold digger? Do they think I'm after his or her money or their family assets? And so I do think the way you start the process can absolutely dictate how it's going to go. If you come home from work and throw a 28-page document that basically says, I keep everything and you get shit, how do you think it's going to go over? And, I think you have to be mindful. And I think a big thing as a lawyer, I always ask, and this is in both prenups and divorces, I like to get under the hood and learn a little about the personality of the other person. Are they a hothead? Are they emotionally charged? Are they analytical? Are they reasonable? Are they thoughtful? Do they make quick decisions? Do they need time to think? Because that helps me be a good advocate and a good conduit for my client. And at the end of the day, the easier I can make the process, the more happy my client's going to be. And just like for you, if you have a lawyer and you feel like they're just eating the other side's shit, you're not going to feel good about it. But if you have a lawyer who says, Lauren, I want to know, what about this bothers you? What about this upsets you? What clauses are the most concerning? And what do we need to change about this document to make you feel good on your wedding day? You're going to feel a hell of a lot better than the schmucky lawyer who doesn't even give you the chance to really talk about it.
Right. And another thing that was really interesting, not that the show is all about me, but I know going through that a lot of our fiancés go through this experience as well. I met with 3 different lawyers prior. And I was biased. I wanted to go with a woman because I wanted her to I just thought that she would automatically think how I think. And I'm trying to double me and have somebody advocate for me on the legal side. But I wanted somebody to just stop and ask me those questions like, are you okay with this? But one thing that was really eye-opening for me was I had a lot of my lawyers say, you don't have to do this. And that was pretty much the most advice I got. But I love your approach, which is, what pisses you off so much that I can go to bat for you on your behalf about? And I think that there's this missing link between, the fiance and the lawyer, that you guys are a team building this collaborative process with your other fiance and their team. And at the end of the day, you guys are playing the same game and you both, just want to win and walk out happy.
Right. And I think too, the advice of you don't have to do this is okay in a vacuum. But the problem is, in theory, these are 2 people who want to get married and have a date certain to get married. And so
exactly.
While I think that advice is important, it's not that practical because let's be candid. Most people probably are not going to call off their marriage for a prenup. And so I think, to me, a better approach than saying, well, fuck it, you don't got to do this if you don't want to, is, well, how can we get it more palatable so you feel good that week before your wedding? That you're not at your dress fitting or at your tux fitting and feeling like shit and being like, what does this person think of me? Totally. And so I come at it from the lens of, this person isn't hiring me to blow their life up. This person is hiring me to say, make sure I don't get fucked over here.
Yep.
And I think if all I'm doing is saying, take it or leave it, don't get married, I'm not doing my job, forget as a lawyer, as an advisor and a counselor. And that's how I see my role, especially as a family lawyer. More of my job as an unlicensed therapist than as an attorney. Yeah. I talk to clients and people all day long about things that have no bearing on the law, but I'm their person. And I talk to people about things from their kids' haircuts to family pictures to vacations to esoteric legal cases about prenups and everything in between. And I think as a family lawyer, I like that about it because I never have a boring day. And I can't say that when I was a business lawyer or a commercial litigator. The shit I get calls on and hear about day in and day out, I never have a boring day. And to me, as a people person, as someone who thrives on that connection and has a genuine thirst to work with people and learn about them, it's great. I say all the time, if you want to be just chained to your desk, burning and churning files and hours, like family law ain't it for you, because you could wake up at 9 a.m. with your day planned and end up on a 3-hour conference call about why your client wants to go to court over their kid's haircut.
Right.
And you just never know what's going to happen. Or you're going to have an altercation at the house and your client's going to ask you come out and supervise them while they move their shit out of the house. And so these things just, you never know where they come up. And I think for me to bring a reasonable and a thoughtful and kind of a calming influence, is important. There's a lot of family lawyers who'd probably like, oh, this guy's a pussy. This guy's a wimp. This guy, and again, there's clients who are going to say, give me all that. Give me that pit bull asshole energy who's going to make a mountain out of a molehill. But you know what? That client's not going to like that bill they're going to get. And the thing that lawyer's not going to tell you is family law is 50-50, maybe 48-52, maybe 45-55. Family law is not 80-20.
Right.
And that's not to say, look, I'm in Metro Detroit. There are tremendously qualified and eminent family lawyers who charge far more than me and have far more experience. And they're exceptional lawyers. But does hiring them mean you're going to get such a better settlement than me? No. A lot of times, you're paying for the privilege of a fancy lawyer, their fancy letterhead, and their fancy office. And I think with the advent of your product and this company, and lawyers like me who don't have a fancy office with mahogany and old books, we're providing accessibility to the next generations who say, hey, I want legal advice and counsel, but I don't have 10 grand for a retainer, or I don't want to pay $4.50 an hour. And so I think the hope is for the work we do in the generations coming who are going to be getting married, signing prenups, and getting divorced, it is how do we make sure that we can provide the services they need how and where they want them. And let's be real, I'm turning 34. My generation has, with a lot of its faults, we want things now, and we don't want to wait for the 73-year-old lawyer to start doing his dictaphone and putting it to his secretary and writing the memo. No, I have clients who will find me, call me, email me, sign my retainer, and pay me within 1 hour.
Yes.
That was unheard of 15 years ago. There are people who probably didn't know they needed a prenup this morning, and by tonight, they'll go on your website, they'll look at our videos, they'll sign up, and they'll have a draft. And so I think the people who are staying by the old archetype of, big bad blow the house down divorce lawyer, or big bad blow the house down, I'm going to wreck you in a prenup, that will always have its place for the people who have, say, parents or advisors or mentors from another generation who only trust the older, the richer, the more expensive. But for everyone else, I think they're going to find that oftentimes there isn't a need for that, and it's really going to be to their detriment.
Well, and one of the things that's really interesting is that more quote unquote everyday people are getting prenups. It's not just these family inheritance, the really rich families that are coming together and they need that pit bull lawyer to make sure that every single penny and every single gem is accounted for. It's everyday people that are getting married later in life. Women are paying out alimony and starting their own businesses and careers. People are just getting married later and doing things, and they come into the marriage with more. And so to your point, accessibility is key because it's becoming something that everyone should have. And it's like insurance, right? You got to have it. You drive a car, you get insurance. You get married, you get a prenup. It's something that has to be in place for everybody. And if it's not accessible to everybody, then something like divorce is going to creep up later and they are going to get that $100,000 bill. So I agree to your point completely.
Absolutely.
It's got to be accessible and approachable.
We do have to say one thing about accessibility, and my advice, this is both legal and personal. Do not wait until you're walking up to the chuppah or the altar or whatever it is in your faith. Many of my clients will try to hire me within 4 weeks of their wedding. I most recently had a wedding on New Year's Eve last year and was hired about December 14th. And while legally those agreements may be enforceable and there might not be any findings of fraud, duress, or what have you, for your own personal sake and your emotional sake, and especially that of the person who's being given the prenup, stay away from that week before. Stay away from those 2 weeks before if you can. Get it done months in advance, because I can tell you, I had a case last year where my client had to go from her wedding dress fitting to come sign the prenup with me, then to her makeup. And I can tell you, she was in one shit mood, and I don't blame her. Mm-hmm. And she gave her husband a ration of shit, and I don't blame her again. And leaving these things to the last minute does no one good. And, my advice, I'm all for accessibility. I'm all for what the advents of technology and Zoom and things like that do. But my one advice is do not leave it to the last minute. Do it in the beginning with your band and with your venue a little after that, because nothing sets the mood for that wedding week, that wedding night, just like going through with two lawyers like me, line by line, and planning what the hell happens when this, marriage doesn't work. So right. I think know that the resources are there for accessibility, but be mindful of the timeline, and especially if you're the one who wants the prenup, because even with accessibility to tools like HelloPrenup or a lawyer like me, account for human time and human scheduling. And I think that's really important, because I think in the world we live in, which is the urgent care environment, where we, fortunately, a lot of things can get things that day. This is not something that comes together for most people in an hour or two. And so I do tell people my one piece of kind of curmudgeon advice is to be mindful of the time horizon and really aim to get this process both initiated and finalized in advance of your nuptials.
Completely agree. And if you didn't retain that, please play that part back over and over and over again and write it on the wall a million times. And I will not wait till the last 2 weeks before my wedding to get this done. One other thing that's really interesting about you, Max, is you come from a background where you see not only what might happen in the event of a divorce, but also what happen in the event of death. Can you explain what the difference is to our fiancés and how they should look at their prenup from both outcomes?
Absolutely. Well, I think what we start with is there's two distinct areas of law. There's family law, which is divorce, and then there's trust and estate, which is where people fill out their wills, trusts, powers of attorney, and documents that contemplate what happens with their property, their family, and their estate in the event of their death. And certain people go to certain types of lawyers for prenups. I have had the fortune of both being a trust and estate lawyer and a family lawyer. I've seen prenups from both sides. I've also negotiated with prenup with people who've hired a trust and estate lawyer and people who've hired a divorce lawyer. And the difference is when you come at it from a family law angle, the lawyers are thinking about divorce. They're thinking about spousal support. They're thinking about what happens with the marital home. They're thinking about any possible payouts in the event there's children. Compare that to trust and estate. They're thinking about certain things like right of survivorship, elective share of the estate. What happens to the decedent if one of you dies? What happens to the children in terms of guardianships? And so there are two different approaches that don't always meld 100%. And so I think it's important for people to both realize that your prenup can both have ramifications, not only in the event of divorce, but also in the event of death of your partner. And let's just take an example of that here. Prenups are usually cut and straightforward. If Jack and Jane are married 8 years and they get divorced, here are their rights and here are the rights they give up. But sometimes people will have boilerplate language in their prenups about, well, what happens to Jack if Jane dies, even if they're married? And a lot of times, especially that trust and estate lawyer, is not going to look out for Jane. They're going to look out for Jack's family and Jack's estate. And so a really important thing to have is, and one of the most emotionally tumultuous parts of prenups, is what if the surviving spouse, while married, is mistreated by the proposed prenup? And I think that's a really important thing to keep an eye out for and make sure you discuss with your lawyer. Because I've had cases where, they've said, oh, well, if they die, you only get a third of the share of the house. Why? If we're married, I should get the whole house, or the house should be for me and the benefit of any children. They're not contemplating it like a divorce. They're contemplating it like a trust and estate lawyer. And so I really try to come at it from both sides to ensure there's no lapses or discrepancies. But it is an important thing to keep an eye on, because there might very well be ramifications and you have two divorce lawyers, and even inadvertently, your rights upon their death could be contravened. And at that point, what I would say is those either need to be addressed, or when the time comes to make your family estate planning, that estate lawyer has to have the prenup there, because if you have conflicting agreements, that's just going to make things a nightmare. So, not everyone has that level of necessarily training or experience, and it's certainly not always required, but it is something I do emphasize because, there is a lot of interplay between the two areas of law.
Absolutely. And that leads me to another point, which is, you said the word guardianship. we can't talk about children in prenups, but we can talk about things like that in estate planning. And we kind of zoom out of the marriage between husband and wife. And that's when it does happen. We get to the estate planning conversation. I have a 2-point part to what you said. The first one is from personal experience. That's what happened to me. I was served a prenup and it was the boilerplate version and it was death and divorce. And I kept thinking to myself, why would death be in a prenup? But it's to your point. There are certain families and instances where they don't want the surviving spouse to just automatically get 100% of the assets or 50% or whatever. So I just wanted to highlight that within the prenup, make sure, fiancés, that you are really understanding that there are survivorship benefits unless, stated otherwise or vice versa. So you got to understand that. And then the second part is, okay, back to estate planning. They have to align. We can include kids in a prenup, but we can talk about
not only that, if I can just make a point.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. In the state of Michigan, and I'm not going to say every state because I'm not barred in every state, but I'm going to imagine in most, if not all states, the 3 things in particular you cannot abridge or contemplate for in prenups in the state of Michigan are custody, child support, and parenting time. And the reason for that is, I don't care what agreement you come to in the state of Michigan, you have no right to usurp the powers of the court with respect to custody, parenting time, or child support. While there are 2 cases in particular, and this is more nerdy stuff, if you're interested, go read the page, that talk about what the court can or cannot infringe upon, it is really important to know, while you can say contemplate for, hey, if I have a really rich family and we want to give you a nice payday for every kid we have, you cannot make ironclad agreements with respect to any custody arrangement, any parenting time arrangement, or child support, because those are the exclusive jurisdiction of the family court in many states, the friend of the court system as well. So just wanted to piggyback on the point you were making as well with, I guess, a little legal jargon too.
No, and I'm glad you did, because one of the questions that I have is, what are the things that we got to exclude? So I'm glad that you highlighted that. But okay, so you do have, because you have that dual brain, right? So what are some things that people can think about, but we can't include in our prenup, but what are some things that we should be thinking about while we are entering marriage and, building this family and signing our prenup all at the same time? What are some things we can set ourselves up with to make sure that the prenup is set properly so that we can possibly, be comfortable building a family down the future?
Well, I think you make a good point, and there's certain, when we say exclusions, it's not that you can't mention them or contemplate for them.
Right. You're
not allowed to usurp the court's jurisdiction, especially with respect to children. So again, if people want to contemplate for, I had a case once, a very rich family, and they were religious, and they had a proposed, sounds very romantic and sexy, but they had a proposed schedule of, if no matter the years, if there was a divorce and there was one child, there would be a one-time payment of $100,000. If there was 2 kids, it would be $200,000. And that's fine. But what you can't do is, you can't say, and that covers child support or that covers custody. And so I think with respect to estate planning, I think it's really about consistency. And a case I had recently, the person who wanted the prenup, who had the marital home prior to marriage, who had, the estate, also needed to account for her nieces and nephews, which is fine. But we had an issue of where if I didn't press for mirroring in the estate plan and the prenup, we would have had an issue, because frankly, the probate court probably wouldn't give 2 shits about the prenup. The family court might not care about the estate plan. And without that duality or consistency, you're really going to have something that, while it might be enforceable, it's just going to be a logistical nightmare. So I think the big things to think about are what is happening in the state of Michigan. We have the right of the surviving spouse in these elective shares. And those are automatic things that someone gets upon death. A lot of times, default prenups actually get rid of those as a result of what's contemplated for in the prenup. I personally don't like that. I guess it also depends on what side of the table I'm on. But really, what it comes to me is, if there's a marital home that is separate property, both in the prenup and the estate, that has to be accounted for. And I had a kind of unique situation before where they owned a nice home. I take it back. The person who wanted the prenup owned a nice home primarily. It was her separate property. While they were married, they lived in there, did whatever, great. And in the initial draft of the prenup, in the event of death, even while married, they said she gets to live in the property, but she has to pay for everything. And I said, well, she'll never be able to afford it. So that's basically a hollow offer. Mm-hmm. So what we did there is we came up with a clever approach. We mirrored it in the estate plan that she would be given a life estate, and there would have to be funds set aside in escrow for 5 years to cover the anticipated property expenses, home insurance, what have you. And at the conclusion of that transition period, which we thought was reasonable, she could either keep the house and if she had the financial stability, or she could sell the house, and there was an agreement that she would get to keep 3/4 of the proceeds, and the nieces and nephews got to split 1/4. And so when we go back to talking about collaborative, it's really creative solutions and creative problem solving. And a lot of lawyers probably would have just been like, fuck it, I'm not dealing with this. But that's how I come to things. I really try to say, especially if you're not already before the court, hey, look, we have a blank slate. We have a tabula rasa. Let's get creative. And in my divorce cases, I do the same thing. You know, I just recently had a case where, you know, February break was one parent said he would not give it up. He wouldn't give it up for the life of it. And it was just, and we weren't going anywhere. And we took a whiteboard and we threw up every vacation on there, and we moved things around, and we made them see that this was one of 7 vacations. And maybe we do it alternating here. Maybe we do things. And I think if there's one thing I know about younger people and younger generations, we demand flexibility.
Yes.
And the old guard, I don't think, is well prepared for that. So I think tools like HelloPrenup, where it is customizable. I think a lawyer like me who's to say, hey, look, you don't work 9 to 5:30 in the same office every day. We're going to need to have a different parenting time schedule. Or, hey, I might not just have a marital home with a picket fence. How are we going to account for our separate and marital property? I think those of us like HelloPrenup, like myself and others, who recognize that, you know, we're in the position to gain and thrive, because I think we're trying to be more creative, we're trying to be more flexible, and we're trying to be more attentive to the needs of the population now.
For sure. And that leads me to another point, which is, you know, not everybody is going to get a prenup, which is okay, to each their own. You know, it's actually okay to do that. But what is some really good advice that you could give to somebody that isn't getting a prenup, and what that means for them as they enter marriage and or get a divorce, et cetera?
So first I'll say, and obviously not to turn this into sales, but if you sell prenups, everyone should get a prenup. If you sell hot dogs, everyone should get hot dogs. If I'm a divorce lawyer, everyone should get divorced. And that's not good or bad, but let me first take a step back. Do I think everyone needs a prenup? No. I say in my divorce practice, I never encourage or discourage divorce. I provide information and knowledge and resources to empower you to make the best decision for yourself, and in a divorce, in that case, your family. Same thing with a prenup. Do I think everyone needs one? No. Have I had clients who've gotten one where I didn't think they need one? Yes. But again, I'm not arrogant enough to tell someone what they need. My job, and I hope whether it's this podcast, your company, my practice, whatever it is, our job is to disseminate information to make people comfortable in the decisions they're going to make for themselves and their marriage and potentially their future divorce. And so what I would say is, especially in the state of Michigan, if you don't want a prenup, if you don't think you can afford one, if you don't think you need one, do not think you're going to be screwed in a divorce. That's not true at all. Family law is in many ways easy in that in the state of Michigan, let's talk about property. Mm-hmm. Property is quite simple. When I have a client and I'm doing a consult, I draw basically a line graph with 2 dates. And I have the date of marriage and the date of divorce. If you got married January 1, 2010, everything before that date is yours. Free and clear. That is yours. If you get divorced January 1, 2025, That meat of 15 years, that's all we care about. Before and after doesn't really matter. And what we do in most cases is equitably split. Now, I tend to think equitably means 50-50. Others don't. We equitably split what happened during the marriage. So I don't want someone to think that but for a prenup, they're somehow going to get royally screwed if they get divorced. Not at all. In fact, some people might do a lot better if they don't have a prenup. But what I would say is, I always say, the most common prenups I get are, one, people who come from family money and their family either suggests it or requires it. Two, second marriages where there are kids and they want to protect their estate for their children. And three, more entrepreneurial people who maybe have either started businesses, don't just work a W-2 job, and believe they have inherent interest to protect. And that's where I've really seen the most prenups. That said, I've had quote unquote normal people who are both W-2 employees who make 80 grand a year want a prenup. And if you want one, great, I'll help you. And we don't have to go make it crazy. But I don't want to sit here and make someone worry if they're getting married next week and they don't have one, like they're going to get screwed. That's not the case at all. What I would say is an advice that a mentor gave in one of my first prenup meetings. I always say, and it's going to sound hokey and it's going to maybe sound full of shit too, but when I talk about, especially with both parties in a room or on a Zoom or on a call, if we've gotten to the point where a prenup is going to happen, I always say, and then I took this from a mentor, wouldn't you rather contemplate for each other while you love and have affection for the other versus when you fucking loathe, despise, hate, would rather, throw an anvil over their head than put them out when they're, in a fiery inferno. And while it sounds hokey or full of shit, I really do think if you're not for the sentimental part of it, at least be for the pragmatic part. And that if you have an enforceable prenup, your divorce is going to be less expensive. It's going to be way easier, and it's going to be less toxic. And, I do a lot of collaborative divorce where they're not miserable divorces. But, I always say too, no divorce is a red velvet cupcake. They're all kind of shit flavored popsicles. Even the best ones going to suck. And so I think if you're going to get a prenup and you contemplate for that, you're going to make your life easier down the road. Again, we hope that document goes in a drawer, never to come back. But if you're not going to get a prenup, what I think what people need to do is just A, be smart about things. B, I'm never a fan of one party, especially today, being the financial overseer. Both people need to know the finances. Both people need to have a sense of what's going on. In my marriage, my wife always tells me to just do everything, and I'm not comfortable with that. And while I do a lot of the heavy lifting with our bills and everything like that, I do keep her apprised and abreast, and I do copy her on things because I'm not comfortable with that power dynamic. A lot of people might be and want to use it for their benefit. I don't think it's good. And really advice I could give, really divorce advice I give, by the time someone has called me and whether they filled out my online form, they've gotten a referral, whatever, I always say, look, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know if you are going to get a divorce. But if you're at the point of calling me and scheduling a confidential consultation, I'm pretty confident if you're not getting a divorce now, you probably are going to get one in the next 12 to 18 months. And certainly not a threat. I have had people who call me. But what I tell people to do is, A, do your due diligence. And I think if you don't know a lawyer, ask friends, ask family, ask coworkers. Everyone knows one. If you're having problems in your marriage, I think you set up a confidential discussion. And I think you basically just say, here's what's going on. Here are the issues I see. I think if we got divorced, parenting time might be a big issue. Or, hey, I had a case recently where my client didn't know if they were worth 10 grand or 10 million. And so I'm like, okay, we're going to really need to allocate a lot of funds and resources for discovery. And so I think it's also really important to, if you're contemplating divorce, always meet with more than one lawyer. I don't care if you meet one lawyer and you think they're a mix of a Supreme Court justice and Jessica Chastain. They're just the ultimate package. Meet with more than one. I tell my consults, I'm not scared. I'm not bashful. Go talk to someone else. 1, see prices. 2, see styles. And 3, I do mean it when I say your family lawyer, it is an intimate relationship. That person is going to have some of the hardest conversations with you in their life. They are going to see your finances. They are going to see your text messages. They are going to see your emails. I've seen recordings of people that they wouldn't want their priest to see or their best friend to see. And I think it is about comfort. And, for me, I really am an empath and I try to blend, hey, I'm your advocate, but I'm also here to be that shoulder. But I also really try to ensure that it's a good fit both ways. And I'm fortunate to be in the position where I won't say I turn down clients, but I'll tell a client, hey, look, your husband hired killer A. I'm not killer B, but I'm going to do my damnedest. I'll get you to killer C. And so I think you need to find a lawyer and a professional who you really feel comfortable with, because sure, could you hire the biggest, baddest name? Great. But you might be a shit case to the biggest, baddest name, and they're gonna hand you off to their B-level associate. So I think if you get to the point where you have concerns about the future of your marriage, having at least 2 or 3 consults with different lawyers and finding whose emotional plight, whose strategy, and kind of who you feel comfortable with. And I always talk about the man, woman, man thing. There's firms out there who are, Adam, we're only men. And in Michigan, there's a firm called Victoria, which is only women. I work with both. For me, it's a business decision. I don't know why I cut myself off to half of the market. I've worked with women I've loved working with. I've worked with men I've loved working with, and I've hated men and women I've worked with, and vice versa. I really think we have gotten away from the cliche that the man needs a woman, the woman needs a man, the woman needs a woman, vice versa. But that being said, it is about comfort level. And, I've had lawyers who I've been referred cases because they're like, hey, it's a wife and it's a badass female lawyer. And they're like, he's not going to want to listen to a woman. He's going to want a man. At the same time, I've had men who are really worried if they go to trial and there's an issue of their kids, that kind of having 2 cocksure men, it's not a good look either. And so I think optics matter a lot less than people think. And my advice is hire the lawyer you're comfortable with, and that will kind of work itself out. And I know it's such an unromantic topic, especially the day after not Thanksgiving. What am I talking about? Valentine's Day. Could be to be talking about this. But I think the people who do their legwork now, and whether it's fulfilling a prenup or at least having their eyes open that not every marriage worked, are going to be more financially protected. They're going to be more emotionally protected. And they're going to be personally prepared for those bumps in the road that come in every marriage. I mean, I think I have a really happy marriage. I'm only 4 years in, and as much as I like to think it could never happen, I'd be a fool not to think with the work I do every day.
Yeah.
So that was a really roundabout answer. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think you answered about 20 other questions I had within that one. So I'm so glad you did. And I'm glad that you took the long route because I enjoyed the entire journey. But Max, thank you so much for our time today.
I do have one. If I could ask, you didn't ask it, but I always do try to get this in.
Please.
I worked with a very prominent family lawyer in South Florida, and we were once at a professional event or something. And, he was in his 70s and he was married 50 years and been doing this work for 45. And someone asked him, what are the reasons to get divorced? What are the real reasons to actually get divorced? And what are the reasons not to? And I always thought, even though it sounds simple, it was really profound. And kind of in a roundabout fashion, I surmise, and in my practice, I see 2 main reasons to end a marriage. And that's not to say that your reason that's outside of these 2 is not wrong. No, this is personal. But someone who does divorce work every day from anywhere from 8 years to 50 and beyond, I think, I guess, the two non-negotiables where you have to really think about it if these exist, and the health of your marriage are: one, lying. I don't care what the lie is. If you have a marriage based on lying, it's never going to work. And I have to be very careful here to couch this, and I'll clarify if it comes off wrong, because I don't want to offend anyone. But someone with drug addiction and or mental health problems so severe, and they refuse to seek out help. Mm-hmm. That's not to say you can't have a healthy and happy marriage with someone who had a drug problem or has mental health issues. Hey, we all have mental health issues. But if you're with someone whose life is so debilitating for you and or your children, and they refuse to seek help, that's going to be a problem. And I've found that I've given that advice to people, and it's not the hunkiest, dooriest advice, but those are the two situations where time and time again, you can't make a marriage work. I don't care what the lies are. And it's not just about cheating. If you lie about finances or gambling or family relations or how to treat your kids or divorce or religion or any of these things. And if you're going to be in a marriage with someone who won't help themselves, then you're tethered to an anchor that's going down. And so I think so many other things in a marriage can be redeemed, can be worked out. I tell people all the time, I work really closely with therapists, and I've seen a ton of marriages salvaged by family therapy, couples counseling, people who genuinely want to put in the work. But I think if there's one thing I've learned as a lawyer, and everyone probably learns as you get older by life experience, I don't care if you pick the wrong job, if you pick the wrong city, if you pick the wrong boss. It doesn't matter. You pick the wrong spouse, it really sends your life for a whirlwind. And what I would say here is, we don't want to make it sound irredeemable. We don't want to make it sound irrevocable. But our day-to-day work is, if you've made that wrong decision, we're here to try and help fix it. But ideally, make the best decision the first time, because truly, hey, I've changed careers. I've moved different places. People have changed everything. But once you get married, that is a huge commitment. And I don't care if you're only married for a year. It will have lifelong implications. And so, as a divorce lawyer who's also a romantic, that is my spin on it.
I think it's a great spin, and I concur as a marketing manager and a romantic as well. So you heard it from me too. Thank you, Max. I appreciate you so much for being here.
Awesome. And obviously, if there's anything else or anything timely comes up, I'm an email or call away. And I really enjoy talking about these topics, which sounds ironic because they're not the most fun to talk to. But I think divorce, and whether it's prenuptial agreements or anything like that, these are staples in people's lives. And I think, it might not be fun to talk about, but I think if we remove the stigma and the boogeyman of it, the general public's going to be more informed and more educated, which is going to make these hard processes easier. And I think whether it's your company or my practice, that's really our aim, to make uncertainty, difficulty, and trauma more palatable.
Absolutely. And if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
So thank you so much for the plug. I mean, I always, so the first thing I write, and it's so cliche in any emails, right? I go, so glad we connected despite the circumstances. But my website is emmerlawplc.com. My email is max@emmerlawplc.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Max S. Emmer or Emmer Law. And if you're in Michigan and you want a little extra help on your prenup, you want someone to review or you want a consult, I have very flexible rates, packages, and ways to work with you. All of my information is on the Michigan page of HelloPrenup. And I'm really excited working together. And I look forward to serving as a Michigan resource. And I look forward to seeing the exciting things for your brand and business to come in the coming year and onward.
Well, thank you. And we're thrilled to partner with you and have you on our team. And fiancés, you heard it first. If you need any advice from a Michigan lawyer who's seen it all, done it all, and has the best approach ever to prenups, family law, family planning, all of it, reach out to Max. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Max.
Thanks so much.